You're single and living alone in a huge house. Of course, the family should be able to use it, right? My younger sister, Kristen, said it without a shred of guilt, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Amid the clinking of champagne glasses and the cheerful laughter of relatives, her words reached my ears with a chilling clarity. Today was my 30th birthday. This $950,000 villa, something I had finally secured after launching an IT startup and working myself to the bone, was a symbol of my independence and success. The large windows reflecting California's clear blue sky, the custom designed kitchen, the silence. Every detail was proof of my effort. And yet, in Kristen's eyes as she stood before me, there was not the slightest hint of respect. All I saw was a sticky, possessive obsession. Nothing more. Holding a glass, she strutted around the living room as if it were already her own and continued with words I could hardly believe. Hey, Denise, your company's doing great, right? Managing a place this luxurious all by yourself must be a hassle. I'll live here for you. You don't need rent from me, obviously. We're family. The gazes of my aunts and uncles froze instantly. Kristen's voice was unnecessarily loud, and the once calm party was suddenly engulfed in a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. I slowly set my glass down on the table and looked straight at her. Kristen, stop joking. This is my house. It's not a place for you to live. At my cold, firm response, my father, Robert, cut in. He stepped into the center of the living room and looked down at me with an intimidating air. Denise, watch your tone. Kristen is your sister. She's struggling right now, trying to start a new business. In this family, it's always been our principle that those who succeed help those who haven't yet. At his words, my mother, Susan, nodded slightly and joined in. That's right, Denise. Family supports one another. Don't you think keeping a house this big all to yourself is a bit too selfish? From the bottom of my heart, I was speechless. Every cent of the down payment, every mortgage payment, this house was bought entirely with the fruits of my own grueling labor. Mom, Dad, this house is my sanctuary. I won't let anyone trample into it, family or not. When I said that, my father's face flushed red with anger. With trembling hands, he pulled his smartphone from his pocket and declared in front of all the relatives, Fine. If that's how you want it, I won't hold back anymore. The party is over. Everyone, leave immediately. Denise, brace yourself. My lawyer will be here shortly. I'll straighten out the legal rights to this house. The invited relatives, wearing confused expressions, began setting down the food and drinks they were holding. My long-awaited 30th birthday was about to end in the worst possible way. Normally, this would be the moment to break down in tears, or explode in rage and shout back. But instead, I was desperately holding back laughter. As the CEO of an IT startup, I had reviewed countless contracts and negotiated with investors. The idea that my father could somehow legally straighten out a house that I owned 100% outright was simply absurd. I silently nodded, turned my back on them, and walked toward the kitchen counter. I poured myself a glass of chilled Perrier and took a sip. The sharp sensation sliding down my throat cleared my thoughts even further. Hey, Denise, didn't you hear? Dad is serious. Kristen called out to my back in a triumphant voice. She was still in her mid-20s, unemployed, having burned through family money under the banner of finding herself. She came to stand beside me, gazing dreamily at the illuminated pool outside the window. This house has 3 guest rooms, right? And that walk-in closet in the master bedroom, it'd be perfect for my clothes. You're always working anyway, you just need a place to sleep. The smallest room is enough for you. The rest of the space should be used effectively by the family. That's the rational choice, don't you think? Without putting my glass down, I glanced at her sideways. You might want to check whether your definition of rational actually matches what's written in the dictionary. Kristen, I'm not giving an inch. At that, my mother approached with a sigh. Wearing the mask of a loving parent, she reached for my shoulder, but I smoothly stepped aside. Denise, don't be so stubborn. Living alone in a space this big, that's lonely. If Kristen lives with you, it'll be lively. She can learn about business by staying close to you. It's a win-win. Are you really going to reject your family's love? Has success made your heart that cold? Family's love? I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Riding on someone else's success to live rent-free in an upscale neighborhood is called parasitism, Mom. The silence in the living room was unbearably heavy, the relatives' stares piercing into us. Unable to stand it any longer, my mother forced an awkward smile and grabbed my arm. Denise, everyone is watching. Let's not argue here. Why don't we step out into the hallway? If we talk quietly as a family, I'm sure you'll understand. Accepting my mother's suggestion, I left the living room with my father, my mother, and Kristen, and we moved into the wide hallway. The moment we stepped into the silent corridor, something happened. A certain smell tickled my nose, completely different from the aromas of food and wine drifting from the living room. It was that cheap, cloyingly sweet perfume Kristen always wore. This wasn't the scent of someone merely standing beside me. It was heavier, ingrained, like it was seeping out from deeper inside the house, from the residential area upstairs. A bad feeling shot through me, and I sprinted up the stairs to the second floor. Hey, Denise, where do you think you're going? My mother shouted after me. Ignoring her, I flung open the door to the guest suite. The sight inside made me catch my breath. In what should have been a pristine guest room, one I hadn't invited anyone to use yet, several gaudy, familiar suitcases were scattered across the floor. From the closet spilled out dresses in unmistakably Kristen's terrible taste. Her handbag was tossed onto the bed, and cosmetics were strewn messily across the dresser. What is this supposed to mean? Kristen, who had followed me upstairs, leaned against the doorframe and smiled slyly. Something glinted in her palm. It was a duplicate of the high-security smart key I had specially commissioned when designing this house. Something no ordinary locksmith should have been able to copy. Surprised? She said smugly. Dad helped me make it while you were away on a business trip to San Francisco. Leaving one of your keys at Mom and Dad's place was your fatal mistake. I figured it was basically a sign saying, family can use it freely, so I happily took you up on it. She showed no shame at all. If anything, she puffed up as if playing the role of the clever little sister. My father and mother caught up moments later, making no attempt to hide anything. Denise, don't make such a scary face, my father said casually as he walked past me and sat down on the luxurious leather sofa in the guest room. It's basic risk management for parents to have a spare key to their daughter's house. What if you collapsed? What if there was a fire? We're always worried about you. Worried? I sneered. That's hard to believe. Bringing in luggage without my permission and occupying my private space? Is that what you call risk management? I threw open the closet door. Where my business suits should have been were Kristen's flashy party dresses and piles of shoes I didn't even know the origin of. This is practically theft. Kristen, pack your things and leave immediately. Otherwise what? Kristen shrieked. You're always like this, Denise. Acting like you're the only special one. You think you built your company all by yourself? Dad raised you strictly when you were little, didn't he? Mom cooked healthy meals to support you, didn't she? And this is how you repay them, refusing to lend one room? As a human being, you're beyond saving. My mother wrapped an arm around Kristen's shoulders and looked at me with the eyes of someone watching a tragic heroine. Denise, you see, Kristen is preparing to launch a new apparel brand using this house as her base. Having an address in such an upscale neighborhood will earn her credibility with business partners. Do you really have the right to crush your sister's dream? Every single one of them genuinely believed my house was shared family property. In their minds, my success equaled the family's collective victory, an utterly misplaced logic. My anger faded, replaced by a certain clarity. Words would never reach these people. Neither logic nor emotion would survive their filter of greed. They would all be twisted into the selfish refusal of an ungrateful daughter. Fine, I said quietly. Didn't you say you called a lawyer, Dad? Then let's discuss this thoroughly, with a third party present. You should have said that from the start, my father replied, nodding in satisfaction. I've already called my friend, Attorney Morris. He specializes in real estate disputes. He'll give you a proper lecture on how legally meaningless your possessiveness really is. I took out my phone and checked the screen. Dozens of notifications stared back at me. Alerts from the hidden cameras installed throughout the house, going back several days. Yes, I already knew. While I was away on business, they had entered my house repeatedly, lounged on my bed, and helped themselves to expensive vintage bottles from my wine cellar. The reason I had deliberately invited the entire family to this housewarming party was for this very moment. Hey, Kristen, That spare key you found at Mom and Dad's. Did you really think I'd simply forgotten it there by accident? At my cold question, Kristen's triumphant smile froze instantly. What are you talking about? It's your fault for leaving it there. No, it was bait. I knew from the beginning that you'd copy it and start invading my house while I was away. Anticipating risks several moves ahead and acting first. That's what I do best as a business owner. Your shallow greed was easier to read than a bug-ridden program. So this was all a setup from the very beginning? My father pointed at me with a trembling finger, his voice shaking with rage. That's right, Dad. I didn't gather all the relatives here today to celebrate my new house. I invited them so that, in front of a large crowd of witnesses with no escape, every single one of them could watch you dig your own grave. This party was a perfectly designed trap, one I set to bury you socially. I said this over my shoulder as I walked back down the stairs. When we returned to the living room, the relatives were still there, unable to leave, frozen in awkward silence. A moment later, the doorbell rang. It was the arrival of the lawyer my father had called, his so-called ally of the family. But almost at the same time, I completed a certain operation on my smart device. When the front door opened, Morris, my father's longtime friend and attorney, stood there. Well, Robert, calling me out on your daughter's birthday night? This doesn't sound like a peaceful situation. Morris set his briefcase down with practiced ease, glanced briefly over the relatives gathered in the living room, and finally turned a cold gaze on me. My father rushed up to him as if he had been waiting all along and clapped him on the shoulder. You came, Morris. As you can see, my daughter is behaving in an utterly inhumane way toward her own family. I want you to clarify the ownership of this house and proceed with the legal steps necessary so the family can rightfully use it. Morris addressed me in a tone one might use to lecture a poorly behaved child. Denise, I've heard the situation from your father. You're single, and hoarding such an enormous asset while denying access to family members in need could be interpreted as contrary to the law. Let's resolve this amicably. We'll draft a contract recognizing certain rooms as Kristen's residence and place of business. That would be best for everyone. Without even glancing at the documents he tried to present, I checked the time. Mr. Morris, I appreciate your professional advice, but before drafting any contracts, it seems there's a physical problem that needs to be addressed first. A physical problem? The moment Morris frowned, a sharp siren sliced through the stillness of the night, growing louder by the second. One car, then another. Blue and red warning lights flooded the large windows this villa was so proud of. What is this? What's going on? My father shouted, rushing to the window. Outside, 3 police cars had blocked the driveway, and armed officers were stepping out. Denise, don't tell me you called the police, my mother asked in a trembling voice. Yes, I reported suspected trespassing and unlawful occupation of assets. A police officer knocked on the front door. I calmly opened it and welcomed 2 officers inside. Thank you for coming. I'm Denise Parker, the one who filed the report. The affected areas are the guest room on the 2nd floor, as well as the kitchen and the wine cellar. Wait! This is a mistake, my father shouted, pushing forward. I'm the homeowner's father. This is just a family dispute. There's no need for police involvement. This lawyer here can prove that. But the officer stopped him with a sharp look. Mr. Parker, according to the report, the security system detected an intrusion using an unauthorized duplicate key, and there is evidence of repeated unlawful entry over several days. We'll need to inspect the premises. Morris was visibly shaken by the police presence. He had come to help my father, but standing before officers, he understood better than anyone how powerless family sentiment was as a shield. As the relatives watched in stunned silence, I mirrored my phone's screen onto the massive monitor in the living room. Everyone, let's take a look at what happened in this house during the 3 days I was in San Francisco. The screen displayed clear night vision footage. It showed my father unlocking the door with the illegally made key, followed by Kristen and my mother entering triumphantly. Kristen danced in my living room. My mother opened my expensive jewelry box and tried things on without permission. My father carried bottles worth thousands of dollars each out of my wine cellar. Then the audio recording played. Denise is so naive, working honestly like that. Once we establish the facts on the ground, she won't dare kick us out because she'll worry about appearances. This house is ours. Kristen's mocking voice echoed through the living room, and a wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the relatives. That's horrible. I can't believe it was all so calculated. I turned back to the officers. They deliberately entered my home while I was away and damaged my assets. Even now, they've brought in their belongings and continue to occupy the house without my consent. This is a clear crime. Faced with the irrefutable evidence on the screen, Morris dropped the fountain pen he had been holding. He couldn't even bring himself to look at my father. He just stood there, stunned. Well then, Mr. Parker, one of the officers said, stepping directly in front of my father, we've reviewed the footage. You stated that you made the key to manage your daughter's house. But in these videos, you appear to be browsing through her jewelry without permission and consuming expensive alcohol. Furthermore, there is an audio recording in which you say you intend to create a fait accompli so she won't be able to kick you out. This goes beyond management. It constitutes suspected premeditated trespassing, theft, and unlawful appropriation of property. That was freedom of speech. Obviously, it was a joke. My father's voice cracked, sweat pouring down his forehead. He looked desperately to Morris, the attorney, for help, but Morris had already closed his briefcase and stepped back. Robert, I'm sorry, but in this situation, there's nothing I can do, Morris said quietly. Before any legal advice can even be given, clear evidence of criminal activity has been made public. If I stay here any longer, my own law license could be at risk. With those words, the family's last remaining shield vanished. Next, an officer stopped Kristen, who was coming down the stairs clutching her belongings. Miss, what's inside that bag? What do you mean? Obviously my clothes. Are you saying staying at my sister's house is a crime? She tried to bluff as usual, but when the officer asked her to open the bag, her hands began to shake violently. Inside were branded accessories taken from my closet and several unopened high-end cosmetics. These were supposed to be gifts. Denise is single and has more than she could ever use. The bags would be happier if I used them. One of my aunts finally snapped. How shameless can you be, Kristen? Have you ever once thought about how hard Denise worked to build this life? The officers continued methodically. Denise, we'll proceed with filing the formal report. Please submit records showing how the duplicate key was made without authorization, along with the timestamps of the intrusions. Yes, the smart lock access logs and the full set of cloud-stored surveillance footage are already prepared for transfer to the police server. As I operated my device, the data synchronized instantly with the officer's tablet. As the CEO of an IT startup, my home security was built on a level far beyond that of an ordinary household. This is flawless evidence, the officer said, nodding. Based on trespassing, theft, and property damage, and considering the total value of the losses, this may qualify as a felony, not a misdemeanor. Robert, Susan, and Kristen, you are to vacate this property immediately. Any resistance will result in arrest on the spot. This can't be happening. It's already night. We have nowhere to go. My mother collapsed into tears, but the officers showed no mercy. The moment you entered without the owner's consent, this ceased to be your home. Prosecutors will review the case and issue arrest warrants shortly. Until then, reflect carefully on the seriousness of your actions. Under the relatives' contemptuous stares, my father, my mother, and Kristen were escorted toward the front door. Kristen screamed until the very end. This is all your fault, Denise. You're just cheap. Her voice was swallowed by the wail of police sirens as the patrol cars pulled away. After the storm passed, only silence remained in the living room, along with the relatives' deep, weary sighs. When the red lights finally disappeared into the distance, I exhaled slowly and turned to face them. They were my aunts, uncles, and cousins, people who lived in society with basic decency. Unlike my parents. I'm truly sorry. You came here today to celebrate my 30th birthday and my new home, yet you had to witness something so ugly. But please understand this one thing. I invited you here because I wanted the truth to be seen openly, not handled in secret. My uncle stepped forward and gently patted my shoulder. You don't need to apologize, Denise. If anything, forgive us for not realizing how much you were carrying alone. I never imagined Robert had become so greedy. Your decision was the right one. What they did is unforgivable, not just as family, but as human beings. The others echoed their support. Threatening you with a lawyer, no real parent would do that. If you ever need help, Denise, call us anytime. We're on your side. One by one, they left with words of encouragement. When the last person closed the door, I stood alone in the center of my spacious living room and looked around again. Kristen's luggage scattered about, the wine my father had drained, the traces of where my mother had rummaged through my belongings. Well, then, time to start cleaning, physically and legally. I opened my banking app on my phone. Every month, automatic payments had been deducted from my account for my father's luxury sedan and my mother's SUV. Gifts from a successful daughter, paid out of goodwill. That goodwill was now completely gone. Without hesitation, I canceled every single automatic payment. The next morning, I received a call from the officer who had handled the case. Denise, the review of the evidence is complete. The prosecutor has determined that this case qualifies as malicious residential trespassing and premeditated theft. Arrest warrants for your father, your mother, and Kristen will be formally issued today. Strangely, I felt no sadness when I heard those words. What I felt instead was a cold, clinical sense of completion. The same feeling I get when a difficult project is finally, decisively finished. 3 days later, I was in my company office watching a certain video my lawyer had sent me. It was footage of my family being arrested in front of their house. As neighbors gathered to see what was happening, my father, Robert, was being handcuffed, shouting over and over, "This is my daughter's harassment. I'm innocent." My mother, Susan, collapsed in tears, covering her face, while Kristen thrashed wildly, resisting the officers with her hair in disarray. The people who had once seen me as nothing more than a wallet or a safety net were now facing the consequences of their own crimes. That scene was the best birthday present I could have asked for. That afternoon, accompanied by my lawyer, I went to the detention center's visiting room. I wasn't there to offer forgiveness. I was there to deliver an ultimatum. Behind the thick acrylic partition, my father looked shockingly aged after only a few days. The styling product that once kept his gray hair immaculate was gone, and he was still wearing a shirt torn during his resistance to arrest. The moment he saw me, he shouted, "Denise, what have you done? What did you tell the police? Withdraw the charges immediately. This is a family matter, isn't it? We just visited your house, that's all." His eyes, swollen from crying, pleaded with me. Kristen is so remorseful now. She's still young. If she gets a criminal record, what will happen to her life? Are you really going to send your own sister to prison? I stared straight into his eyes through the acrylic barrier. You still don't understand. I didn't call the police because you visited. I did it because you systematically tried to destroy my life, my work, and my privacy. Before worrying about Kristen's future, why didn't you stop her when she tried to steal tens of thousands of dollars worth of items from my closet? That's because she wanted them. As her sister, it was only natural for you to give them to her. That single word, natural, extinguished the very last trace of attachment I had left. Natural. That word is what brought you here. Before I turned 30, did you ever once say happy birthday to me? When I built a $950,000 house, did you ever acknowledge the effort it took? All you ever calculated was how much easier and more luxurious your lives would become. I stood up and straightened the collar of my coat. I've stopped paying the loans. Your cars will be repossessed as early as tomorrow. I will never be your safety net again. Wait, Denise. Ignoring my father's desperate scream, I left the visiting room without looking back. Outside, the sun was dazzling. I felt light, like a burden I had carried for 30 years had finally fallen away. A few days later, I returned to my villa. The chaos of that night had been completely erased by professional cleaners. In addition to the existing smart locks, I installed a state-of-the-art vein authentication system on the front door. The windows were upgraded to the highest level of bulletproof and anti-intrusion glass, and AI-powered motion detection cameras now monitored the property 24/7. I also obtained a temporary restraining order barring my entire family from coming within 500 yards of me. They would never again enter my field of vision. Later, my father and Kristen were convicted of first-degree residential burglary and grand larceny, while my mother, Susan, was found guilty as an accomplice. Because it was their first offense and they accepted the restitution I demanded, they avoided prison and received suspended sentences. However, their lives were permanently branded with the words convicted and criminal record, marks that are fatal in society. A According to relatives, they were forced out of the house they'd lived in for years and now reside in a damp, thin walled apartment in the suburbs, constantly blaming one another. They went around crying to everyone that Denise abandoned us, but not a single relative believed them. Every one of them had witnessed what truly happened in my home that day. With criminal records stamped on their resumes, they couldn't find stable work. Now they spend their days doing manual labor at a local warehouse, bundled in thermal gear, hauling cardboard boxes from morning till night. Outside my window, the same beautiful California starry sky as last year stretches endlessly overhead. Alone, but never lonely, I quietly raise my glass in the silence. To my 31-year-old self, cherish this greatest gift of all, freedom. What I gained on my 30th birthday wasn't a $950,000 villa. It was my own life that no one will ever threaten again.